I am Tamy Tiongson, and this is how I create.
Welcome to This Is How We Create, a show that digs deeper into the creative life of contemporary artists of color. Discover what feeds their creativity and how they found or are finding their artistic voice. Through these intimate and candid conversations, you'll gain insights into the lives of creative professionals of color that are hard to find anywhere else. Hello, it's Martine Severin again. I have a quick question for you. When was the last time someone delighted you? For me, this happened last week when I interviewed Tamy Tiongson for the podcast. Tamy is a hospitality and restaurant expert who uses cooking and baking as a way to express her creativity. During this episode, Tamy shares her journey from culinary school to working in hospitality and in the restaurant industry. For years, she baked as a way to relieve stress. And when the pandemic hit, she refocused her energy to open her bake shop, Tamarella's Kitchen. Tamy delighted me a second time by sending a basket of goodies from Tamarella's Kitchen to my very own door. Oh my goodness. There were the ginger molasses cookies. There were blondies. If you haven't had a chance to check her out, definitely look at the show notes. Let's go ahead and turn to the show so that you can learn a little bit more about Tamy. Enjoy. I'm Martine Severin, and this is How We Create. Today on the show, we're turning our attention to the culinary arts and the art of hostmanship. We're chatting with cook and baker Tamy Tiongson. Born and raised in New Jersey, Tamy prides herself on being a professional feeder, peacemaker, and tension tamer. All things that she attributes to her experience as a food and beverage manager and to growing up in a big and loving Filipino family. Growing up in a big family dynamic where entertainment was a natural part of everyday life, Tamy knew from a very young age that life in the hospitality industry was her calling. Welcome to the show, Tamy.
Thank you for having me on, Martine.
I'm so excited to talk with you. I think our conversation is so appropriate to talk about the culinary arts as well as hostmanship as we are heading into Thanksgiving. Granted, this year, Thanksgiving will be unlike any other holiday we celebrate here in the U.S. due to the fact that we are still in a pandemic.
Right.
I wanted to start out by asking you about what it was like for you to grow up in such a big Filipino family. In particular, we all know that food is such an important part of our lives and it brings us pleasure and pain, especially when we enjoy too much of it.
Right.
Can you tell us about your first memories that include food?
I tell my family this and my friends this all the time. My earliest memories are not of looking at Sesame Street or playing with a favorite toy or anything like that. My very first memories actually are something that are so strong and stick with me because it's of my grandfather. My mom's dad, Lulubon, as we called him, he was a Chinese immigrant to the Philippines, and he owned several restaurants and hotels back in the Philippines. And when he immigrated to the States, cooking became something that was brought into the family house, which was not something that was necessarily done back in the Philippines. If you own a business, things like that, that's business time. My mom didn't learn how to cook at home from her father, even though they had, all this background. So when he came here to the States, my grandfather would oftentimes bake us these special Chinese and Filipino delicacies. So my very first memory is being up in the kitchen with him very early in the morning, 5, 6 in the morning, a lot of times before the sun even came up, and him clearing off the kitchen table and rolling out the dough for siopao, which is also known as bao buns. So he would make the dough from scratch and the filling from scratch. And I can see the gold medal flour that he was adamant about using. That was the only brand he wanted to use. And I can smell the flour, just even to the day, that the smell of just flour being wet with water is instantly it brings me right back. I can feel the stickiness, the tackiness of the dough in my hands, and I can hear his voice still. I can still bring myself right back to that. And, I must have been 3 or 4. Very early memories. I couldn't tell you what else is going on, but, him folding in the filling for the bao and slicing the eggs properly just to fold in and giving me a little piece of dough to mess around with, and me trying to copy him. So my earliest memories are of food, and they always bring me right back.
One of my favorite smells is of my grandmother would make this kind of like a pudding by putting flour in a pan and toasting it. She would toast it and then add milk to create some kind of like, it's kind of like a flour soup.
A roux. She
A
made a
roux.
roux.
That,
Yeah.
see, it's nice to have someone. But that's what you would actually just eat the roux, which is
Oh,
really funny. Yes. I'm really pleased that we kind of have something similar here, something in common about our love of flour.
there it is.
So, is his favorite brand of flour still your favorite brand of flour?
Honestly, I'm less gold medal, and I'm very much a King Arthur kind of girl. I mean, maybe that's just my what does my mom like to call it? My hipster calling. But King Arthur's always consistent. Gold medal I will use if I'm doing any recipes in relation to the things that he's like passed down. But I'm less brand loyal in that sense, I guess. But if I see it, I will buy it because I know like that's him. Like those colors, orange and gold is what the branding is for that. And a lot of people growing up in New York, New Jersey, gold and orange is like, oh, the meth. No, that's gold medal flour in my mind. Sorry.
I remember being in London making pizza and
Mm.
knowing that the Waitrose brand of flour to give
Hmm.
us the best pizza dough, whereas all of the other brands just didn't really cut it because they all absorb water at different rates.
Right.
Yeah.
Protein content is it's truly it's different from flour to flour and brand to brand. It's totally a thing. That's not just like saying like, oh, well, I like this brand of sugar better than that one. Like, no, that's a real thing. Like sugar is sugar, doesn't matter. But flour, there's different weights, there's different textures, there's protein content is a big thing too. And whether you realize it or not, that has to do everything to do with when you're making a dough, like pizza and things like that. So you're spot on there. Maybe you didn't know it, but you were spot on.
Well, this is a great segue to talk about culinary school. Can you tell us about why you decided to go to culinary school?
Sure. Well, like I said, I grew up in, a household where food was everything, and lots of entertaining and things like that. And growing up, as a kid of the 90s, we didn't have cable in my house. We would watch a lot of PBS, Martin Yan and Julia Child and Jacques Pepin. Those were my guys. Forget about all the cartoons. I wasn't a Power Ranger kid. Like, no, I would come home and I'd watch TV, and I would watch all of the cooking shows on PBS like a weirdo because I don't know many 4-year-olds. I mean, at least at that time. I feel like now, Food Network and all these shows have become like hot and trendy. But back then, I was an anomaly. It was so strange that as a kid, I'd sit there and like watch very intently as they're making all these things that like I had no idea. I didn't know what a shallot was. What's a leek? Like, I don't know, but I'm watching him take this down. This is happening.
Well, this
Um,
is, I remember Yen Can Cook, right? That was
oh,
the
my
show. That was
grandfather
such a good show.
hated it.
Really?
Yes, because
Why?
my grandfather's Chinese, and I don't know, he just thought he was tacky. Like, oh, look at him. He's so stupid with his fast chopping. Nobody cuts like that. He thought he was a yokel. Like, he just thought it was a sellout kind of thing. So he hated him. So I wasn't allowed to watch Yan if my grandfather was home because it was a big deal. Like, oh, you better turn that off. Lulu hates that guy. Like, he would hear his voice from the other room. It's like, what are you watching? Like, oh, nothing, just changing channels.
That's so funny. So you grew up watching those television shows on PBS, and
Mhm.
then you got more and more interested in cooking.
Yes and no. Like it was always kind of like in the background. And again, back then it was still considered a trade school. It wasn't something that high school kids would aspire to go to, like Johnson and Wales and CIA. Those did exist, but it didn't have quite the mass appeal, I suppose, back then. So it was kind of always like, oh, I'd love to do that. I could get a degree, and it was never a viable career choice for me. Growing up, I wanted to be a writer. I thought I was gonna, go to NYU and then fall right into a globe trotting job as a journalist with the New York Times. That was in my mind's eye. That's what I was gonna do. Leaving high school, I went to Seton Hall University in Jersey, and I was following a communications track. I was one semester in, and one of my very best friends from high school was She was in a car accident and died tragically. We were 18. We were kids. It was, like right after our first semester at college. And that pretty much put my world on its end. Like 18, you think you're invincible. You think the whole world is in front of you and nothing awful can happen. And, for the most part, that's the case, right? But I think it was just such a jarring experience to me. And I actually remember driving to school one day and randomly getting on the phone. I think I was trying to call my sister, and my brother-in-law picked up for whatever reason. And somehow we just got on this random track of conversation. I was like, you know what? This is crazy. Life is short. I don't really like what I'm studying right now. I don't want to be a journalist. I don't care for this. I don't even know why I'm doing this. Really what I want to do is cook. I want to go to culinary school. And he was like, F it, just do it. Life is short, Tam, do it. For whatever. I still remember driving down Route 3 and having this moment of clarity in my Honda CRV, like, yeah, you're right. I'm going to do it. I left Seton Hall after that semester and I enrolled in culinary school at the Art Institute of New York City. And that was that. And I kind of took a departure from the path that I always assumed I would take. I went to a all girls Catholic prep school in Jersey. It was very much the assumption that you're going to go to, an Ivy League school or top tier school and you're going to follow the quote unquote path of you're going to get a degree, you'll probably get an advanced degree, you'll get a high powered career and, go, go, go. I think after the loss of my friend Jella, it just wasn't something that was so appealing to me anymore. I just didn't care. And life is short. Let's do what you want to do. I love cooking. I've always known this. I've known this as a kid. And so I don't think it came as a surprise to my parents and to my family when I came home and I was like, I want to go to culinary school. And it was just kind of like, okay. Whereas a few years back when I was applying for colleges, I thought like culinary school, nobody actually does that. That's not a thing you do, especially if, you've gone to college prep schools and done all this.
Well, first, I want to say that I'm really sorry to hear that your friend passed.
Thank you.
Um, it's very interesting, isn't it, how we come to make the big life decisions. And sometimes it's our mortality or mortality in general just facing us and helping us to choose a different path.
Right.
Because you could have been that globe-trotting journalist working for the New York Times, but I guess it turned out that that wasn't a good fit for you.
Hmm.
And so what happened since culinary school?
Well, culinary school is also a pretty eye-opening, funny thing. So I went to culinary school and I went to culinary school in New York City. And going to school in the city, I mean, I grew up in Jersey City, which is it's the Cambridge equivalent to Boston. Like you're right across the river. You tell people you're from New York because if you say you're from Jersey, the automatic assumption is, oh, she's one of those Jersey Shore girls and things like that. And that's not the case. It's kind of like you live outside of Manhattan versus I live in Jersey, right? So going to school in New York, it's high energy, it's high intensity, and it's not really the traditional school experience, as it were. I mean, going to school on a university campus where you're kind of isolated in this little campus bubble with all college co-eds is a very different experience than commuting on the subways like a normal New Yorker and bumping into things and taking the elevator up into this, skyrise building, and that's where your school is. So that experience, I think, helped ground me and helped me realize, like, I love this, but I don't need to take this route. I think it definitely opened my eyes up to realizing that there's not one pathway to any one career, any one success, I suppose. Because I went to culinary school for, I don't know, it was shy of a year. I didn't finish the degree because then we had another, my sister was in a terrible accident. She's fine. She's absolutely fine now, thank God. But again, it was another just jarring life moment where I'm like, oh my God, like what's the meaning of life? What am I doing? This is crazy. And after having done, I think I got halfway through the program at that point, and I realized I was like, you know what, I can always come back to this because culinary school, um, in a more fluid way, is something that you can come back to, if that makes any sense. I feel like college is for college kids. Like, yeah, if you're older, you can definitely go back to school, you can go back to college, but the true quote unquote college experience is made for, your 20s, right? With culinary school, I was in class with people who had just fallen out of high school, like I had, and I was in class with people who were lawyers and just were doing this because it's what they wanted to do always. And, people who had been in the industry and had 5 kids and just wanted to, get a degree so that they can take their success up one notch. So it was such a motley crew of people. It was for me, I just felt like I don't need to do this right now. I can always come back to it. And having met so many people who had experience in the hospitality and culinary industry, and meeting people who knew nothing, like absolutely nothing, it kind of gave me the confidence to say, yeah, you know what, I don't need to follow this path. It's not a cookie cutter path. I can come back to this if I want to. And so I left culinary school thinking like I'm going to go back to college and get a business degree and then come back to culinary school. And I it just didn't happen that way. I left culinary school and I got my business degree and in a normal university in Montclair State. And then I started working. I started working in the industry, and once you start working, you don't want to stop and go back to learn the things that you're learning on the job. And in the hospitality world, more there, I think, than anywhere else. You really get the best training hands on. You can sit in hours and hours worth of courses and kitchen classes and learn theoretical techniques, but you'll never get it the way you get it when you're on the clock and you need to make sure that things get done this way.
Can you tell me a few or give me a few examples about the difference between theory and practice in terms of some of the things that you learned in theory in school and then seeing them when you are interacting with guests?
Well, in school, everything is textbook. It's very black and white. It's this or that. People will come in, and you must be very cautious if they tell you they have a peanut allergy, right? Okay, that sounds easy enough. Of course, everyone's going to tell you they have a peanut allergy. Like, who's going to walk in and not inform you of an allergy? Well, let me tell you something. People walk in all the time, sit in your restaurant, order your food, and they're a bite or two in. Then they say, "Are there any nuts in this? I'm allergic." And it's like, what? Why didn't you tell me that? I don't understand. Wait, excuse me? Uh, so things like that. It's like real life versus the theoreticals in the book. Like there are things that you just can't prepare yourself for reading in a book or, learning in a class lecture that are going to happen inevitably in the real world. Hotel guests are never, cut and dry. It's never a easy transaction. It's always there's an asterisk next to every transaction you have. People will always change their minds on the fly, and there's always things you just don't realize happen in real life that no amount of schooling is going to prepare you for in the kitchen or in the hospitality realm, because humans are funny. There's just so many variations and possibilities, and people are wacky. They're
Can you tell me some of, and this is for purely selfish reasons, in terms of dealing with some people who are, to be honest, difficult?
oh,
What are some of
difficult,
the
yeah.
things, how have you learned to deal with difficult people? Because you must be the master of it now.
Yeah, it's so funny. I've worked with so many wonderful people and in so many different situations. When you're going through the situation, sometimes you're like, I can't effing believe this is happening. Like this has got to be a joke. And sometimes I'm reminded of things and like my mind is blown. Like I have no idea how I kept my head on straight that day. One that I can think of that definitely stands out that happened in the past few years. At one of the restaurants where I was working most recently, we offered a special chef's tasting menu, right? And so this parameter was the chef will prepare you a multi-course omakase menu. Omakase is a Japanese word that basically means that the chef is going to prepare you the best of the best. And it's not a set menu. It's kind of inspired by whatever they're finding that day or that week when they're preparing, right? When people book this, we ask them if there's any allergies, if there's any dietary restrictions, or aversions, like, oh, well, I'm a vegetarian, but I hate tomatoes. Okay, great. And the chef is great and works around that. In this scenario, we had a table that booked for a 50th birthday party, I think. So it's a big deal event. And they told me, well, we have a couple of vegetarians on the table. Okay, that's easy enough. We can take care of that. Any other restrictions? Oh, well, two of our friends are vegans. Oh, okay, we can deal with vegans. That's easy enough. But they're also not eating anything with oil. I said, okay. So you have some vegetarians on the table, easy enough. You have some vegans on the table. Okay, that's a little more tricky, but okay, no problem. But you have two that are vegan but don't eat any oil. Right. Okay, got it. Okay, no problem. So the chef prepares this wonderful meal for them, and midway through, one of the vegan no oil guests stood up and walked over like to the pass. So it's where the food gets prepared and before it gets sent off to the dining room. This is ridiculous. Are you going to send us anything aside from vegetables? I'm standing there and I kind of side-eyed the chef. I'm like, what the hell is this guy serious? You're vegan and you're complaining about vegetables? I don't understand. So I said to him, sir, the chef has prepared this expansive coursed out meal, but we're doing our best to work around your parameters. Is there something that you are looking for in particular? He said, yeah, we'd really love some egg noodles or something. And I'm like, wait a minute. If he is a vegan and he's telling me he doesn't want to eat vegetables and he's telling me he wants egg noodles, sir, we can't serve you egg noodles because there are eggs in them. We have rice noodles, we can give you those. Yeah, fine, but just, you got to cut it out with all these vegetables. And I'm like, what? They, needless to say, they were a handful. Everybody else on the table was lovely, and they weren't even the birthday celebrants, which makes it so awful. In any case, this restaurant, we didn't have a dessert program. So the guests said, oh, we want to bring in a cake for the 50th birthday. Okay, no problem. You can bring in the cake. The cake is this huge Italian creamy cannoli cake. They blow out the candles, they do all their photo ops, and we bring it back to the kitchen to slice it up and give to them. The server gets to the table and, obviously had to skip the vegan oil-free crowd. The guy stands up and goes, excuse me, are you ignoring me? I'd like a slice of cake, please. The server looks at him and says, well, sir, I understand you're eating vegan, and this is definitely not a vegan cake, and there's oil in it for sure. He goes, oh, well, I'll cheat for cake. Martine, when I tell you, like, I'm talking about this, and this is probably 4 years ago, and it's making my blood boil right now. I'm like, ugh. That was the one time I can say in my entire career where I was like, I got to take a walk. Like, I need a walk around the block. I don't even smoke a cigarette, and I probably want a cigarette because I'm about to lose my mind with these people.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? Like, I'm telling the story, and I'm like, am I exaggerating this? I'm like, no, this is exactly what happened. I'm probably like mellowing it out a little bit. Mm-hmm.
People always change their minds. That's always interesting. But I suppose this also leads us to a great opening to talk about next week is Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
Is it next week? It is next
It's
week.
next week, yeah.
Oh, goodness, it's next week. So Thanksgiving is next week, and a lot of us aren't going to be able to have our family members with us because we're still in a worldwide pandemic. And here in the US, as for Chicago where I'm based, we have a stay-at-home order. The numbers are spiking everywhere in the US, and we have been advised to cancel Thanksgiving in some ways this year and potentially have gatherings over Zoom or gatherings in different ways. How can we make our friends and family feel special and practice hostmanship, which we'll talk a little bit about later when we're not actually able to see people?
I think now more than ever in 2020, we're in position to be able to extend that hostmanship and that level of hospitality and sharing both near and far because we have all these things at our fingertips that we didn't have before. Things like Instacart and other delivery apps, Amazon, just the birth of next day shipping, 2-day shipping, and things like that, I think makes a big difference. I just celebrated my birthday this past weekend. Typically, it would have been something where, my family would have gathered. We probably would have driven down to see them. A big celebration always centered around food and things like that. And this year we couldn't because of, like you said, the pandemic and cases rising and the like. And we just don't feel comfortable going to see my parents who are much much older than they think they are at this point, but very very spry chickens just the same. So in any case, my family, very cute. They actually Instacarted me a delivery from Wegmans. So they sent a surf and turf dinner, as it were. So they sent us lobster tails and T-bone steaks and crab cakes and flowers. And then, the piece de resistance, they sent a Carvel cake with, complete with a little stick-on candy letters to write out happy birthday and a birthday candle. And I'm just like, how freaking cute are they? Like, that absolutely made my day. And it's not something that I was expecting, but there's still that level of connection and thoughtfulness and celebration, even though we are not physically together. We're still able to share in this celebration. And, we did the Zoom sing call and things like that. And it's very sweet. And I think it's definitely doable. And I think because we can't just show up on somebody's doorstep, because you can't just, randomly pop in on your neighbors or your best friend 2 towns over because of what's going on in the world right now with the pandemic. I think that there's a level of thoughtfulness that's involved and consideration that maybe didn't exist before. I think that you have to plan ahead now, and you have to be thoughtful about, your purchases and delivery services and how you can best utilize these things and maximize your thoughtfulness, as it were, your hostmanship. So, for example, my family, like I said, we're not going down for Thanksgiving for my family. And, my siblings, 2 of my siblings live in Jersey near my parents. And my other sister lives out in the mountains in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania. We're currently collaborating on an Instacart order so that maybe we can just send everything, all the, bits and pieces of a Thanksgiving dinner to my parents, so that, whether or not my other siblings who live locally can join them, they don't have to do the shopping, and they can still have the idea of a Thanksgiving dinner, even though we're not all together. So I think while it's difficult for us to physically all be apart, I don't necessarily think that that means you must be disconnected. In so many ways, I think I'm more connected now to my friends and family because the expectation is to check in on each other because things are so crazy right now. Whereas before, when in quote unquote normal times, everyone's busy, everyone's working, you're go, go, go. Like, I might not talk to my best friends for weeks and weeks and sometimes longer than that because you don't have the time. You're constantly on the go. You're under time parameters that are, work, school, gym, go, go, go. And now we don't have that same kind of go, go, go. You're busy, but in a different fashion. And I think that if you are thoughtful and you care to extend the idea of the holidays and hostmanship to your family and friends this year, you can definitely still do it and, make it a very memorable holiday season, albeit a very different one.
Well, that I feel like that's exactly what I needed to hear. So thank you. And secondly, happy belated birthday.
Thank you.
Well, how cute are your parents?
Oh my God, they're so cute. It was so
Oh,
cute.
wow. And I mean, in general, you're right in terms of being able to send someone an Instacart with groceries, with whatever that you can spare to help them over the holidays and to let them know that you're thinking about them. But as you were chatting, some of the words that I wrote down were connection, thoughtfulness, consideration, and planning ahead. Because if you're far from your friends and from your family, you have to plan in order for things to reach them and to let them know that you're thinking about them and that they're still very special to you. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
One of the things I do with my sister Jenny, whom you the two of you know each other very well,
Love her.
is I might keep her after all these years. She spontaneously sends me things, and I think usually it's around the fall, and it'll be little things such as a new lipstick, or moisturizer. Well, she sent me her puzzles and a a home jacket because I'm always
Oh,
cold, and so she
I got
sent
a
one to
Jenny
me.
puzzle too this
You
pandemic.
did?
Just saying, just putting it out there in the world, just FYI.
But that's, I think, food is certainly one way of letting people know that you're thinking about them. But I think just a little bit of a care package, I think now more than ever is really important, and to help people know, especially when it's unexpected.
Right, those are the best. Like, there's no reason for this. I'm just thinking of you and I want you to smile today.
Yeah, exactly. But I wanted to chat a little bit more about hostmanship because this is what hospitality is all about, making people feel special.
Right.
But you must have had you experienced that in your own family because I remember in reading your bio, one of the things you mentioned is like as a family, you entertain quite a bit. And hostmanship, that's where it starts. It starts in the home in terms of when someone enters through, your threshold, to be able to greet them and to make sure that they feel welcome.
Right.
And I guess my
Um,
question is, how do you practice hostmanship
well, for
personally?
me, I think, like you said, because I grew up in the household I did, and because my mom, I mean, my mom loves entertaining. She is obviously pre-COVID. Let's put that little disclaimer in there. She always had friends over. She was always entertaining, and maybe not so formally. It was never like a fancy dinner party, break out the china, but I grew up in a household where there was always something in the oven. My mom was almost always expecting somebody just to kind of drop in for coffee and maybe a piece of cake and chit chat after church or something like that. So I feel like making someone feel special and making them feel welcome can be just as simple as that, putting on a pot of coffee and making sure there's a comfortable place for them to sit while you catch up on whatever neighborhood gossip is going on, or touch base. For me, hostmanship it's what I live and breathe on. I take joy in making other people feel welcome, and I don't want to say accepted, but I suppose that's what it is. I feel like, especially nowadays, in this crazy world, you crave that sense of connection, that sense of feeling like you're wanted in this space. I think that's something that's challenging and exciting to accomplish in a space like a hotel or a restaurant. That's a very public space. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of people coming in and out of that space on a normal basis. And again, pre-COVID, right? It's both your biggest job and your biggest challenge and your biggest triumph, at that matter, to make somebody feel like they are seen and recognized for who they are, and feel welcome in this space. I worked in hotels where we had 1,300 rooms, and you'd have to fight to find a connection to make somebody feel like they're not just somebody passing through, to feel that personal connection, that personal touch, that they're your guests. They're not just another person who's walking through these doors, another person who's eating in your establishment. This is your guest. And I take that philosophy very much to heart. I want people to feel welcome. And that starts from the very first second they, walk in the door. A proper greeting, a eye contact greeting, and welcoming them in by name if you have it, goes the distance. And, kind of breaking that ice and making them feel like, you are my guest. I want you to feel welcome, and I want you to feel like we are excited to have you here. And those are all things that, you wouldn't necessarily express verbally, because that's a little bizarre to say that to somebody. But there are nonverbal cues. There are things that you can do that show that you're paying attention. Simple things like, I'm sure there are things that people don't even necessarily equate to hospitality, like making sure your glass of water is full, making sure that, you have clean linens or napkins on your table. Those are the little things that, if you're paying attention to your guests, those are the things that are taken care of, and you don't have to look for, you don't have to ask for. And those are things that maybe are little pet peeves. Like, I know when, I go to a restaurant and my husband looks for a glass of water, it's like, oh, these people aren't paying attention to us. Part of it is that they're not paying attention to us, but part of it it breaks the magic of feeling like you're a guest. You now feel like you're a burden, or you're chasing someone down. And that's the last thing that you want to happen, without making it sound so sanctimonious or so, high level. It's just about making people feel good. It's about making people feel like they're welcome.
So I grew up in a family where there was, like your mom, there was always something on the stove, or always a treat to be had, because you would always have visitors.
Hmm.
And it's one of the things that I extended to my studio whenever we have a shoot. And usually these things are 3 days, sometimes a week long. And it's so important that the people who are hiring you and your team as well, that everyone feels welcomed from the minute they walk in the studio. And we normally have someone whose sole job is to practice hostmanship, because I can't
Right.
always do it because I'm running here and there doing
Right.
whatever it is. But for me as a brand, one of the hallmarks, the thing that I say over and over again, is that connection and community is really important to me as a person. And the one way that, into my brand, into the photos that I take, and I want people to feel like warm and happy, my photos will bring or a slice of happiness to their lives. And the way
Mhm.
that we communicate that non-verbally once people are working with me is through this hostmanship. They walk in, they're welcomed, we have tea time.
Mm,
Not, we
love
don't
tea time.
announce, yeah, it's not announced as tea time, but there's tea, there's coffee, there's biscotti, there are things that people can nibble on. And then
Right.
later in the afternoon, when people start getting a little bit hungry, there's a cheese plate as well. So it's just, it's not, it doesn't take that much effort to
Right.
make
It's
people feel good.
right. It's a level of thoughtfulness. It's nice to just, without saying anything. If I see that there's, there's coffee, there's tea, there's little nibbly bits, it's like, oh, how sweet that they thought ahead to think that this is going to be, a several hour process. And at some point you're going to want to nibble on something. You're going to want to refresh your palate, and that's all unsaid without words. It's just, it's out, it's here, you're welcome to it, and I think that when all is said and done, I don't really care what you're putting out. You can pop open a bag of Oreos and plunk down some, bottled water. But the fact is that you thought enough about somebody and the comfort of the people that you're with or you're partaking this time with, and that speaks volumes. And I think that's really what true hospitality is.
I agree with you, because it's one thing to practice hospitality with the people that you know very well, but it's another thing to practice it with complete strangers and people that you see over and over again. And the reason I say that is because you are a badass when it comes to hospitality. You worked
Thank you.
you worked you did the Hyatt Hotels Food and Beverage Corporate Management Training Program, which I'm assuming is not easy. And
It was a
then
challenge for sure, but
you worked for the Hyatt Regency in Orlando. Then
Mhm.
you came back to New York. You opened the restaurant, correct?
Mhm. Yep.
Then you managed the rooftop bar at the Harvard Club in NYC. And
Right.
we all know, like, I love a Harvard Club, but people are picky at those Harvard
Hmm.
clubs.
They are particular and they know what they know. They like what they like, and that is it. And
Hmm.
that is an interesting form of hospitality. And that was the first club I'd ever worked at. And that is an interesting beast in and of itself, because you know the people who are coming in, you know their preferences, and as you get to know them more, and as they come in day after day, week after week, you note those preferences. So Mr. So and so likes to sit at that table in the window. He likes to have his coffee midway through his meal, and he likes this and not that. You get all those particulars down, and there's a form of hospitality there that exists, that a very intimate form of hospitality, because they're coming, that these people have their preferences. And it's really, that I think was the most eye-opening level of hospitality I think I've had, because it was unlike anything I'd experienced before, because you don't typically expect to see your guests so frequently.
So after you left the Harvard Club in New York, is that the time where you moved to Boston?
Yes, I left the Harvard Club and moved to Boston, and my husband and I started a brand new life here in Boston. At the time, I was a little reluctant to apply for any positions in restaurants, and definitely not hotels. I kind of said to him, "We want to find a work-life balance, and I will not find that working hospitality, because the demands of a hotel manager or a restaurant manager is 60, 70, 80 hours a week sometimes. And that's the expectation. That's normal. A 40-hour week, we're joking with each other in the banquet office, like, oh, wow, you have a 40-hour week. What are you taking vacation days? Like, oh, half days? What's going on? It's almost this toxic culture that exists in the hospitality world where the expectation is that you are going to work till you can't anymore. A 12-hour workday is a normal day. An 8-hour workday is unheard of for a manager. So when I moved up to Boston, I basically looked at any job but a hotel or restaurant management position. So I was like, maybe I'll get an office job. I can find something 9 to 5, something like that. And then a ad caught my eye. Actually, that your sister posted for I think the phrase she used was a super cool manager for a super hip new restaurant or something like that. But I was like, let me just read this. I'm sure I want to apply for this. It was this little gem of a restaurant in Harvard Square in Cambridge called Night Market. It was one of the best experiences I've ever had in my working career because it was fun and exciting, and it was not, it's high stakes and high pressure the way any restaurant is, because that's just the nature of feeding people on a time constraint. But it was very much a work-life balance scenario where, I didn't stress out about not having things perfect on my days off. And, we would always get back to it. And I think leaving hotels, leaving restaurants that are so high stress and high pressure really took the edge off of hospitality for me, because there's a point at which I think I was burnt out. It's something that's a joyful thing to do, to host people and to take care of people for a living. It's something that if you're passionate about, you derive joy out of it. And I do, and I did. But at a certain point, when you're turning ballrooms for 700 people on a daily basis and you're getting into arguments with clients and union employees and HR, it's not fun anymore. I think being able to take a step back and to work for companies and restaurants where, I was allowed to focus on the true art of hospitality. It really helped me rediscover my love of what I do.
I remember going to night market a few times. I don't know if I met you during those times, but it certainly is a fun place and has a very different vibe than most restaurants in
Right.
Cambridge or even Boston at the time. There was graffiti on the walls.
Yeah, but night market was a lot of fun because you know what? It was what I like to call unapologetically real. I took my job very seriously, as did Chef Jason, and the rest of our team, who was incredible. But it wasn't a super serious thing. I went from dealing with clients who were booking $50,000 all day conference events in New York to 50-seat restaurant in a walk down basement in Harvard Square. It was the ability to kind of like take yourself not so seriously, like putting together playlists. Like, yeah, I'm going to put some Erykah Badu on here. I'm going to put some Sade on here, and I'm going to throw some Nas in there for good measure too. It was such a fun environment because I looked forward to going to work every day, because it was purely about good food, good music, a good time, and it wasn't taking ourselves so seriously. Like, if somebody walked in and was like, oh man, are you going to play this music this loud all night? I'm like, yeah, it'll probably get louder later too. It is what it is. It's not what it's not. If you want a quiet experience, that we respect that. Let me give you some recommendations. And, as I'm saying it, I feel like I'm sounding like an asshole, but it was very unapologetic in the way that we presented ourselves. Like, we're not trying to be more than we are. We are not trying to pretend we're something that we're not, but this is who we are. We're serving up good food. This is the environment we like. We're artist friendly, we're street art friendly, and if that's not something that's your appeal, that's cool. Then we're just not for you.
Night market closed, right?
Yeah, night market actually closed last year, unrelated to COVID, and
Okay.
it just kind of ran its course. Unfortunately, I think it came as a shock to all of us, but I think the ownership was just ready to move on and just close that chapter for us. It was nice. It was almost like we got to go out on a high note, and we were still cranking every night, busy every night still. So it was never like this decline where it's like, okay, guys, well, we've hit the end of the road. It was kind of, we were able to go out with a bang, leave the people wanting more, as they say.
And so
Yeah.
now I think you moved over to Parsnip, right? Right
Mm-hmm.
across the way, right across Brattle Square. And from there, and Parsnip because of COVID as well, had to close.
Right.
And so right now you are baking and you're creating these delights that look so delicious. And I'm so bummed that I'm not living in Cambridge anymore.
That's
So
okay. I'll
it's,
ship you some, Martine. No
girl, you
problem.
better.
I will. Done and done.
I will put, I will happily receive whatever you send my way. Now you are, you're baking and cooking for friends under Tamarella's Kitchen.
Hmm.
So can you tell me a little bit about that and how and why you decided to start this new venture?
Okay, so Tamarella is my family's nickname for me because as a tot, I loved Cinderella and I watched the VHS so much so that our VCR ate the tape. Tamarella was my nickname as a kid and it's kind of stuck and that's my family's pet name for me. So Tamarella's Kitchen is kind of like this background passion project I've had for the past, I don't know, maybe 5 years or 6 years that I've kind of unofficially done with, friends and families and things like that. So anytime one of my friends had a birthday or a special occasion, I would inevitably bake something or cook something and bring it over. With working, I would oftentimes test new things when I got out of work at night and, bring it in the next day and had lots of taste testers on my staff to check everything out and give feedback. And once the pandemic hit, I kind of took it as an opportunity to bake and cook through things that I've been wanting to test out and revisit some recipes that I haven't done in a while. And I I have a community of friends here where I live who were also glad to see that I was unemployed and, baking and cooking through my stress through the pandemic because they were able to benefit from that. So there's lots of text messages and social distant porch pickups and things like that in the very early days of the pandemic. So I would, wake up in the morning and there would be a pound of flour and 5 black bananas on my doorstep from one of my girlfriends at the gym. And okay, come back in a few hours. And then they would have some great banana bread or, whatever else it was that I was whipping up in the kitchen that day. So it kind of started as a vehicle for my stress and just something to keep my mind off of the constant droning of bad news on TV and in the world right now, and especially in the very beginning of the pandemic. And then, at some point, one of my girlfriends from back home on one of our Zoom calls was like, Tam, can you mail me some cookies? And I'm like, yeah, I can mail you some cookies. Of course I can. My other girlfriends on the phone were like, well, me too, and me too. And some of my best friends live in New Jersey and in California and Vegas now. So in the beginning, it was a kind of test to see like, okay, well, I'm mailing it. It's warm out. I don't know if it's going to make it to you in time. Let's see. So the first couple weeks, it was kind of just testing to friends. And then it became, oh, my friend would like to order some cookies from you. Can she pay you for them? And it kind of grown from there very organically. So I kind of have this homemade baked goods business operating out of my kitchen here at home. And so as you can imagine, it always smells like a bakery in here, and we're always chomping on something and trying to pack it up and send it out before I eat everything.
I have a very important follow-up question. One, do you mail your key lime pies? Two, how did the lemon blueberry cake with lemon blueberry curd and torch marshmallow frosting taste like? Did you make that for yourself?
I love that these are very pointed questions, so that's great. No, unfortunately, key lime pie does not ship well, and I'm sorry for that. But if I figure out a way, Martine, you are first on my list to get that.
I just have to say boo.
The lemon blueberry, that was like a random wild card thing. Again, one of those things that I had the time to kind of mess with it. And one of my girlfriends, she was like, "Oh, it's my husband's birthday. He likes fruit-based stuff. He doesn't really care for chocolate. What can you do?" And I'm like, "You know what? Do you want to try something different? How about this, and this?" And there's this lemon blueberry cake that I love to make. I had just gotten through a fresh batch of blueberries from the farmer's market that week, and I was just like, I have too many. I can't physically eat them all. I'm going to make them into curd. And then I was like, oh, well, what if I put that and that cake together? Also, I have a blowtorch and I haven't used it in several months because, yeah, let's blowtorch something. That kind of came about accidentally and it worked. And I love the way it looked. If you've seen it, I'm sure you've seen it on my Instagram. So you see it's like visually very stunning and just, It was a lot of fun to put together. I'm sure it was even more fun to eat. I didn't eat it because it was for a friend's birthday, so I didn't partake in that.
Well, you make it again. It looks so good.
Yeah, like most of the time I have my like tried and true things, and I like to I like to bake pretty seasonally. In the summertime, it's like berries, berries, berries. Right now, I'll bake it for you, but I'm probably not very excited about it because it's not berry season anymore in
That
the
makes sense.
Northeast. So, to answer your question, yes.
Are you sharing your recipes?
I started a blog a little while ago, and it's one of those things that it sounds like a good idea, and it's like, yeah, of course I can put that together. Why not? It's so easy. And I posted one recipe up there, and I keep putting it on my to-do list, and it just somehow, some way never makes it to the top of that to-do list. So in theory, I share recipes. In practice, I'm pretty awful at updating that blog, but maybe I'll get better at it this year. Maybe that'll be, one of my resolutions this year to go about being better at.
Well, Tammy, thank you so much for coming on and for chatting with me about life, about cooking, about hosting, and about the art of making people feel good and about hostmanship. Do you have anything to add before we go?
This is probably the part where people say something very insightful and leave you with something to ponder on the rest of the day. But overall, just in this past crazy, crazy year, I just urge everyone to be more thoughtful and cognizant of each other and the people in your life, and be a host of those good wishes that you're constantly running through in your mind. In the moments that you're scrolling through Instagram and liking a friend of yours post, you can drop them a quick note in the mail. That's so underrated, and people don't do that anymore, but I find that that's such a thoughtful little surprise to get if you're being thought of, and there was just that extra step above double tapping a photo on the internet.
That is brilliant. I can't wait to see you when I come to Boston, when
I know,
all
I
of
can't
this
wait to
is
feed
over.
you. I'm so excited.
Oh, and if you ever want to work on your cookbook together, I'll come down just so that we could spend a weekend cooking and taking photos. And
Oh my God, stop. My tail is totally wagging. Ah.
I'll do it because it means that if I come and we take photos, I get to taste it at the end. Everything.
That's the hardest part for me, honestly, because I bake and I cook all this stuff and nobody eats it. It's just me and my husband at home, and he's constantly on a diet. So, like, I'm serious. I'm not even kidding. I seriously, like, if you saw on my Instagram this weekend, I baked myself two different layer cakes and cupcakes, and I literally was texting all my friends, in the area yesterday. I was like, you need to come pick up some cake. There's obscene amounts of cake in this house right now. You need to come by. It's like, okay, no problem. So, I mean, if you were around, you would get very well fed. I'm just saying.
Oh, it also sounds like a great business idea of a random cake subscription service.
I
You don't
mean,
know what you'll get, but you'll get something.
put a pin in that, Martine. Maybe I take that from you and like call it the Martine special or something like that. That's pretty great. I love
It's like
that.
having a sandwich named after you, isn't it?
Yes, I love that.
Oh, well, I'm so pleased to have chatted with you and thank you for all that you've done. And I've learned so much just chatting with you. I feel like I'll be a better
Oh,
host and a better friend, honestly. I'm gonna hang up and go call someone.
there you go. There you go. Well, thanks for having me on. This was so much fun.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.